Nuts, as we know, are a wonderful health food, many great properties, the omegas, the healthy fats, and so on. Brilliant source of healthy fats. The problem with nut butter, though, is it's incredibly calorie dense, as I say, 615 calories or so per 100 grams, which is astronomical. So yes, you can still eat nut butter and lose weight, but you cannot be anywhere near as liberal as maybe something like hummus or maybe a nice natural jam or jelly for my friends across the pond that you could lather on a slice of toast. You could be far more liberal with those things, and you wouldn't have to be worrying about over-consuming on a calorie front. Do not underestimate the role of exercise because you've been told it's all about nutrition. It isn't all about nutrition. It's largely about nutrition. I know that sounds like a very subtle difference, but it's a really important distinction. There is a big difference between it's all about the nutrition, suggesting the only thing that matters for weight loss is food, and then saying it's largely about the food. And I think a lot in the vegan plant-based community, you do hear this focus on food. It's all about the nutrition. It's all about the nutrition. And then, adversely, in the mainstream health and weight loss world, you'll hear people say, no, it's 50% food and 50% exercise. Again, for the record, I think those guys are wrong too. They're vastly overestimating the role of exercise. The bottom line on this is, look, what's going to work for weight loss is you being in a sensible calorie deficit. You can achieve a sensible calorie deficit with food changes alone. You can be in a calorie deficit without exercise. It is literally possible to lose weight doing zero exercise, maybe just a little bit of pottering around your house. Zero exercise and you can lose weight. That's true. But at the same time, my argument for use of exercise as a tool for weight loss, but also general health and well-being and feeling good in life, is that it makes it easier to be in a calorie deficit if you're doing a bit of exercise. So yeah, you don't have to, but I think it makes it easier. And that's why I don't believe that it's all about the nutrition. I think the distinction is that it's largely about the nutrition. So please don't underestimate the role of exercise when it comes to actually losing weight.
Next is, what fat percentage in your diet do you typically recommend?
Because it's relative to a degree, but 15% seems to be a good rule of thumb. I have made my arguments against consuming less than 10% of calories from fat, as is sort of advertised or advocated, let's say, in the 80-10-10 approach that's sort of early vegan YouTube. It was very popular on early vegan YouTube. Maybe a more sort of McDougallized or starch solution approach also advises around, or perhaps even arguably less than 10% of calories from fat. I think that is too low. I think you're missing out on some of the important benefits hormonally from fat intake and the likes of nutrients, so omega-3s, that unless you're supplementing DHA, you're not taking care of that easily without those fat-rich plant foods in your diet to some degree. So I think 15% is about right, and you're not at risk of going too high. That's still a low-fat diet, but not a ridiculously low-fat diet. The best of both worlds, let's say.
For you then, was that the missing piece of the puzzle looking back? It was the carb component. And before that, whether you even had the language for this or not, you were maybe trying to do almost like a plant-based keto thing, or a vegan keto thing, which occasionally on Instagram I see someone that's doing that, but it's so hard to do because so many plant foods are rich in carbohydrates, as you know.
Yeah.
And that's not, when it's from a whole food source, that's not the red flag that many people think it is. So for you, that was the missing piece of the puzzle. It was getting permission to eat good, clean carbohydrate. We want to stress that. We're not talking about soda and
Okay.
No. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm talking about potatoes and rice and beans and...
Permission to keep things simple is granted to you. Not that you need my permission. You can do what you want, whatever you please. Ultimately, you don't need to take my advice. But I would give you permission to keep things simple. I think some people get so elaborate with this cooking stuff. They're looking at the vegan cookbooks, thinking that they probably need more variety from a taste perspective than they actually do. Thinking that they probably need more variety from a nutrient diversity perspective than they actually do. You'll be absolutely fine with just 5 or 6 high-quality, nutritious meals in your diet and just rotating between those. And when one of those gets stale, like it did for the oatmeal a couple of years ago, find something else, switch it up, and that's when I got onto the cereal bowls. Do focus predominantly on whole foods. This is not something I need to beat the drum on for too long here. You're familiar with my channel, you've heard others say this before. It's not rocket science, it's not profound. This isn't to say that all processed foods are automatically bad or automatically terrible for weight loss. It's not that straightforward. What about whole wheat pasta or, cereal like bran flakes? These are technically processed foods. Whole grain breads. These are technically processed foods, but they're fiber rich, still have a relatively low caloric density. They're wonderful for both health and weight loss efforts as well. Are they bad just because they're processed? No, of course not. It's not quite that simplistic. But I think as a general rule, it's definitely best to make a conscious effort to fit as many whole foods onto your plate as you possibly can. They're going to have, as I say, high fiber content, low caloric density, and be packed with nutrients that leave you feeling nourished, fueled, well satisfied. And again, this is just, I'm talking about satiety here, but also, in terms of more widely health and well-being, what a nutrient-rich diet this diet actually is when you eat lots of whole foods. If you're eating all the vegan junk, then maybe you're not, reaping the rewards from that. You also need a calorie deficit that moves as you lose weight. And this is a huge mistake I see. People will lose 20 pounds, they'll hit a plateau, and then they'll wonder why they're no longer losing. And they're thinking, well, hold on, I'm still doing all the same stuff. I'm eating the exact same meals as when I was losing weight before. What on earth's going on? Surely I should be losing weight since I'm doing this, following the same plan, the same strategy. Absolutely not. As you become a lighter entity, a lighter mass, you need less calories to maintain that weight, to keep that body moving, breathing, surviving, so on and so forth. Cognitive ability, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, your calorie requirements generally, there are exceptions to this, such as if your exercise dramatically increases, but generally your calorie requirements, will actually decrease as you become a lighter entity, as you lose weight. And so it's not only rather important to have a calorie deficit, it's also important to understand that calorie deficit, or that calorie intake rather, it needs to move with your progress, and people don't realize this. So as weight loss slows down, one thing you might wish to try, or if you hit a plateau, try taking 50 calories or so off your daily diet. Just 50. You don't need to do anything radical. Some people, when they stop losing weight, they're like, right, I'll stop eating breakfast. No, goodness me, no, that's far too aggressive. Just try taking 50 calories off your daily diet, and you'll be amazed what small changes you need to make to your calorie intake to actually get weight loss moving again, or speed it up again in times of slowness.
Is there such a thing as a slow metabolism?
I don't know if slow is the right word. That's maybe a bit of a bro science or like pseudoscience word, but there's definitely such a thing as a less efficient metabolism. I think one of the big misunderstandings in the mainstream health and weight loss world is that metabolism is fixed, and that it's set and it doesn't change, and therefore you can very accurately and precisely predict how many calories to feed someone, and therefore what will happen to their body weight and body composition as a result of feeding X amount of calories to said person. This is all predicated on the idea that you can actually predict that, which is all predicated, again, the next step, by extension, on the idea that the metabolism is fixed and you can accurately predict that. Metabolism moves. It's more like a sliding scale rather than set, and I think that's a really important thing to understand. So, is it true that you can is there such a thing as a slow metabolism? There's such a thing as a efficient or inefficient metabolism, or let's say more efficient and less efficient metabolism, and it is something that moves, and by managing various lifestyle factors, from nutrition to sleep to hydration to stress management, hormonal function, you can ensure that your metabolism is as efficient as it can be, and therefore you can consume as many possible calories for weight loss.
Food that can accelerate metabolism.
All the metabolism questions here, right? No, they're good. Metabolism is really something that's probably a fairly neglected topic when it comes to health and weight loss. So I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're being included. I'm glad to see you guys are thinking about these things. This diet is amazing anyway. This diet is amazing, metabolically for so many reasons. But you can check out foods that have a particularly high thermic effect. I mean, many plant foods do have a really high thermic effect. By this idea of thermogenics or thermic effect, if you're not familiar, basically a food with a high thermic effect requires a lot of energy to digest comparatively versus other foods. And so plant foods have a really high thermic effect anyway by default, usually because they're extremely high in fiber. And fibrous foods have a really high thermic effect. They require a lot of energy to digest. Fiber draws a lot of water to your digestive system. It's a lot of work to break down, as it should be, because we're designed to have very high fiber diets. We don't nowadays, but we're designed to. And so fiber has a very high thermic effect. Foods actually that are high in protein have a very high thermic effect as well, which the really sort of anti-protein vegans will not want to hear, but it's true. So foods that are high in protein have quite a high thermic effect. But you can just Google this. There's things like chili peppers, because they contain capsicum, have a really high thermic effect. Mushrooms, ginger, mustard seeds. So there are foods that have a very, very high thermic effect anyway, but to be honest, I think this is really advanced and it's kind of minutiae. Generally, a fairly well-balanced diverse plant-based diet, and you'll be capitalizing on the thermic effect of plant foods easily anyway. Thinking that a plant-based diet is going to be your magic pill. I've seen it do miraculous things. I get messages from my vegan, slim and sustain students every day, I kid you not, saying, Ryan, I was able to get off statins. Ryan, my cholesterol has fallen through the floor. Ryan, I've lost 30 pounds on your program. I'm not saying this to be braggadocious. I'm standing on the shoulders of this incredible nutrition philosophy. It can do incredible things. You hear all these stories of people reversing major chronic disease with a plant-based diet. Wonderful. So maybe it will be your savior. But let me put it like this. If you're an emotional eater, if you binge eat right now, please do not think that a plant-based diet is going to save you by itself, because it's not. And I think a lot of people with a poor relationship with food are particularly attracted to a plant-based diet because they hear messaging in this community that says, don't worry about cravings. You're binge eating, it'll go away because you can eat as much as you want. As long as it's a whole plant food, you can eat as much as you want. Not true, my friends. Very, very naive. In my stern and honest opinion, this is very, very naive. It's not going to fix those things. It might help. The fiber content, the self-limiting nature because of the nutrient profile of many of these foods. It might help keep cravings away. It might help lower the chance that you'll binge eat. But if you've got a poor relationship with food right now, a plant-based diet's not going to mask that. It will still rear its ugly head. If you think poorly around food, if you have inbuilt associations with poor foods, and you've had those for decades and decades, eating healthily is not by itself going to cure that. I make the argument that it will help, but it isn't going to be, as I say, your magic pill. You're going to need, sadly, to do that internal work also. Let's also think that, as an extension to this, nutrition is just one piece of the puzzle. What about rest? What about recovery? Stress management? Having a good social life? We spoke about hydration earlier on, of course, exercise. All of these things are going to contribute to your physical and mental health and well-being. Nutrition is a huge piece of the puzzle, don't get me wrong, but there's other boxes to check as well, and I'm encouraging you in this video to focus on those too. And this is something I noticed very, very early on, and again, another really pleasant surprise, just how quickly your taste buds can change. Not only palate, but also gut bacteria, which I think people are often shocked to hear plays a really huge role in dictating your taste preferences. Some people view the gut almost like a second brain in that regard. Very intelligent indeed. Also habits as well. I think to establish, transitioning your microbiome, taste preferences via the palate, and your habits, when you're actually consistent, it doesn't really take that long. Now, that's the caveat, is you need to be consistent, right? If you're eating well 4 days of the week, and then on the weekend you're having a bunch of booze, a bunch of junk food, it's going to be very hard for your body to get used to that transition. But when you're actually consistent for a decent period of time, let's say hypothetically here 1 to 2 weeks, this is what I notice with my clients, that's when I'll start receiving messages from them along the lines of, well, it's amazing how I really don't miss the food that I thought I used to love. And I'm really starting to just crave, the tofu stir fry on my meal plan, Ryan. What's going on, right? And so, yeah, I think that was really, really surprising to me. And people spoke about it, when I first went vegan and I was watching other vegan YouTubers and reading blogs from when blogs were still a thing in 2015. People were telling me, look, your taste buds are going to change really fast. And I probably was slightly skeptical. I was probably like, no, surely not. I was willing to give it a go, but I was probably slightly skeptical about that element. But no, it's absolutely correct. When you're consistent, your taste buds will change amazingly quickly. So any fears you have about missing meat or dairy, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how quickly those things fade away. If you found the information in this video helpful, but you need that next level of instruction, support, and accountability to, number 1, lose weight, number 2, learn how to easily keep it off this time round, and number 3, create healthy habits for life, click the link below. I'll tell you more about how I've helped over 300 men and women lose 10, 20, 30 or more pounds with simple plant-based meals without having to count or track their calories and with gentle exercise only. Click the link below this video.